Every Little Kiss. Book 7, Summer Kisses Series. By Melinda Curtis. Prologue. In the sunset of her life, Dorothy Summer had developed a royal obsession. Oh, not about Charles, those ears. Or the British royal family, all that infighting. No. It was royalty in general that fascinated Dotty. The secrecy, the glittering crowns, the obscure countries so small that nearly everyone was of royal blood. And the rumors. Every royal must speak at least 3 languages. Every line of royalty has a birthmark somewhere. Only those of true royal blood would notice a pea beneath their mattress. Dotty wanted to know if the rumors were fact or fiction. All she needed was a royal to find out. A few years ago, Dotty had tried to convince someone in her family to take her to the coronation in London. You'd think with as many children, grandchildren, and friends as she had that Dotty would have found someone interested in hopping across the pond for a bit of royal watching. But even her granddaughter Maggie, who was on record as wanting to date a prince, wasn't interested in chaperoning her. That was the thing about moving in with your adult children. They didn't want to let you out without a chaperone. Not even for a once-in-a-lifetime coronation. But darn it. That coronation had been Dotty's best chance to hobnob with royalty, perhaps even be a lady-in-waiting. Dotty's last hope for a royal experience now rested with Maggie. She worked as a big animal veterinarian in the Hamptons. The Hamptons weren't as trendy as they used to be, but surely Maggie would bump into a royal in time for her sister Kitty's wedding day. And considering Kitty was marrying Maggie's former fiancé, Dotty was betting that Maggie would come through on her promise to attend the Christmas nuptials with a prince on her arm, if only to show the world that she'd moved on. Dotty could hardly wait. But first, she had to attend another Summer Sisters engagement party in Boston. Chapter 1. Dr. Maggie Summer stood in a dark corner of a Boston pub on a Friday night before Christmas. She clung to a wilting red rose as tightly as she'd held on to hope for the past hour. And for that, she deserved some kind of reward. The pub was typical for watering holes near Harvard, dim lighting, tacky beer-branded decor, bad music. Elvis was currently singing about his blue Christmas. Maggie had been standing because she'd read somewhere that one did not receive royalty sitting down. She stomped her black, lug-soled boot on the floor. How long does one wait for a royal blind date to show? In Maggie's case, it was approaching an hour. Her sister Violet's engagement party was going to start in 15 minutes. Most other women would have bailed by now. But that was the thing about Maggie, as the youngest of 5 sisters, she was used to waiting her turn and being last. Last one to get braces, a bra, and a boyfriend. Last one to earn a driver's license and complete college. Last one to don a tiara as a New York debutante. Although, unlike her 4 older sisters, she'd worn lug-soled army boots beneath her Cinderella gown. Very undebutante-like. And that was the crux of Maggie's life. She was a New York debutante and heiress, but she didn't fit the mold. She was a large animal vet, comfortable treating her patients in less than pristine circumstances. She wasn't delicate or dainty. She wasn't elegant or hoity-toity. In fact, when she attended social events, which was rarely, Maggie was the summer sister who received a slight frown, a disapproving head shake, and the words, "Are you still in that phase?" from society mavens. That phase? It wasn't a phase. It was Maggie, all day, every day, month after month, year after year. Her hair was black and frizzed at a hint of humidity. Hello, Boston. Her wardrobe consisted of mostly black items, like the plain cocktail dress she'd chosen tonight. She hated heels and currently wore a black pair of lug-soled ankle boots. It didn't take Maggie's father or New York society to point out what Maggie knew. She stood out. And in their eyes, she stood out for all the wrong reasons. And yet, a part of her longed to blend in, to be part of the crowd, to be the least talked about summer sister on the planet. Overlooked. Also attending. A footnote, not a headline. And the easiest way to be invisible at the string of upcoming family events: Sister Violet's engagement party to Coop tonight, Sister Kitty's dress rehearsal tomorrow, Kitty's wedding to Beck on Sunday, and the family Christmas on Monday, was to have a plus one, especially when each of her 4 sisters had a significant other. For months, Maggie had clung to the notion that it would be easier to hold her head high during this long weekend if she had someone fabulous by her side. A prince among men. Preferably an actual prince, because Maggie was a realist. She'd never blend in completely. And if she couldn't, it was better to stand out in a good way. A regal way. A royal way. Yeah, it was a teenage girl type of dream. But it was a dream Maggie had clung to. And just when Maggie was ready to admit defeat, Sister Violet had taken pity on Maggie and enlisted the help of a colleague at Harvard to fix Maggie up with a special graduate student, a prince from a foreign land. But the prince was late, Violet's engagement party was about to begin, and tomorrow launched Kitty's wedding weekend. Maggie was out of miracles. A prince? What prince went on blind dates? Admitting defeat, Maggie tossed the red rose on the nearby corner table just as a man entered the pub. His gaze swept the room, stopped on the rose, and then lifted to Maggie's face. She caught her breath. He was gorgeous. Clean-cut, blonde hair. Intense green eyes. Chiseled cheekbones and regal bearing. He wore a dark suit and tie, a thick black wool jacket, and had an air of detachment that indicated he remained calm among commoners, no matter their reaction to him. My prince! He was everything a girl in need of a fake, royal boyfriend was looking for to get through a week of wedding events and family gatherings. Even if I had only arranged a date for just one night, there was a slight possibility that he was going to be alone over the Christmas weekend and might want to spend more time together. The man crossed the room with firmly measured steps and a posture that was ramrod straight. He looked neither right nor left. He stared only at Maggie. Directly into her eyes. Maggie wanted to melt. Her knees were weak, and her body felt liquid. And yet, she couldn't collapse. If this was the prince she'd been waiting for, he wouldn't approve of so-called hysterics. If he was a prince, he had to be a prince. Maggie could imagine him knighting heroic citizens with a gleaming silver sword. She could picture him riding on horseback in dress uniform, leading neat lines of marching soldiers. She could see him sitting on a radiant throne with a crown perched perfectly upon all that golden hair. Such bearing. Such tight control. Such cool detachment. Ah, yes. Maggie was getting a very clear picture about this particular prince, one that gave solidity to her knees and substance to her limbs. Because despite an overactive imagination, what Maggie couldn't visualize was herself being by this man's side. Distant, privileged men invariably disapproved of her on first impression. There was no hint of a smile on that perfectly structured face. He wasn't pleased to be here and perhaps hadn't been since the moment he'd laid eyes on Maggie's untamable hair and lug-soled boots. Maggie's prince stopped in front of her with that stiff formality. Are you Dr. Maggie Summer? His voice was perfect, deep in tone, a soft, hard-to-place accent, and crisp enunciation of every syllable. Yes. That's me. More people filed into the pub, glanced their way, put a strain on Maggie's smile. Most of her family were already in the back room where the party was being held. Most, but not all. Sometime soon, Kitty and Beck, this weekend's bride and groom, would enter that door. If this dating ruse was going to work, Maggie needed things to move forward. Quickly. Sit down so we can talk. Strategize, more like. They needed a cover story. Something more legitimate than a veterinarian and a prince walk into a bar. They sat across from each other, the wilted red rose on the table between them. What now? Maggie frowned. Tried to concentrate on the obstacles ahead. Opened her mouth to address the man sitting across from her. Realized she hadn't greeted the prince properly. That's not good. Maggie stumbled to her feet and curtsied. Badly. She blamed her lug soles. Your Majesty. I'm so happy to meet you. And then because Maggie was a veterinarian who prided herself on her professionalism, she shook his hand. More like snatched it without permission to shake the life out of him. Another potentially protocol deal-breaker. She swallowed thickly, sat back down, and rushed on. I appreciate you doing this. But I don't have much time before the last of my family arrives for the party, so I'm going to be blunt. He didn't have to know that bluntness was one of her dominant character traits. First, what should I call you? Your Majesty? My prince? My prince? Maggie resisted rolling her eyes. I've never met royalty, so I'm probably going to break a lot of rules in the next few minutes. And for that, I'm going to apologize in advance. It's just that, Vi didn't tell me your name or how to address you. The front door of the pub creaked open, drawing Maggie's attention. Her prince sneezed, softly. Elegantly. Like a prince. Bless you, Maggie said absently, relieved that it wasn't Kitty and Beck coming through that door. I didn't sneeze. A bemused smile cracked the prince's regal facade. Fitzhugh. That's my name. Prince Fitzhugh. That sounded exotic. The opening bars of I Want a Hippopotamus for Christmas filled the air. Classy, this pub wasn't. Even the Christmas tree on the corner of the bar was cheap plastic. Maggie vaguely remembered that someone Violet knew owned the pub and had offered use of the back room for free. It wasn't a royal hangout by any stretch. The prince glanced toward the door. I'm losing him. Maggie lunged for his hand. I don't know how much you were told about my situation, but she could feel her cheeks heat and her deodorant fail due to a scorching combination of embarrassment and desperation. My oldest sister is getting married on Christmas Eve to the man who left me at the altar a year and a half ago. Maggie frowned, still clutching Fitzhugh's hand. That's not exactly right. I was walking down the aisle when Kitty kissed him on the altar to test his love for me. He didn't pass, and I turned around and fled. Fitzhugh's hand was warm, his skin smooth and unblemished. But those intelligent green eyes. They remained detached. I know now that it was for the best. I didn't love Beck the way I should have. I let my father dictate the progression of our relationship. And her mother choose her wedding dress. What a fashion fail that had been. I changed everything about myself to please everyone but myself. There'd be no more of that. My sisters and I used to be close, but after that. No. Now, I just want to feel as if I'm not the notorious cousin or the irresponsible niece or the blackest of black sheep in the family. Which is where you come in. Maggie didn't dare look into Fitzhugh's bright green eyes anymore, afraid that she might see pity. Or worse, that cool detachment he'd marched in with. She rushed on. Actually, I don't usually find myself in need of a prince. I mean, why bother? But look at me. Maggie gestured toward her plain black dress and below the table to her black, chunky boots. I am the weed among the delicate blooms that are the summer sisters. And if it wasn't for my former favorite sister marrying my former catch of a fiancé, I'd go stag this holiday season. Maggie let go of his hand. It was time for Prince Fitzhugh to choose. Not that she stopped talking. My sister Violet and her professor friend twisted your arm and got you here. I don't know how you feel about that. But I would greatly appreciate you being my +1 tonight. And for the next few days, teenage Maggie added silently. So there it is. Will you be my fake, royal date? I swear, I'm not trying to trap you into matrimony. Or kiss those perfect lips of yours. She risked a look at Prince Fitzhugh's handsome face. His nose wasn't in the air. His lips were no longer in a thin line. And his eyes, they weren't looking at her as if she might have designs on his wallet or the family jewels. Movement by the door caught her eye. And there they are. Kitty and Beck. Prince Fitzhugh followed the direction of her gaze. Beck removed Kitty's coat. He kissed her sweetly, staring at her with true love in his eyes. He'd never looked at Maggie that way. Nor had she mooned over him. There they are, Maggie repeated softly. I'm happy for them. Truly. I just wish I didn't suspect that most people need to see me with a man to believe I've moved on, even if I know I've moved on. Beck and Kitty made their way to the back room, laughing and talking to each other as if the rest of the pub was empty. As if Maggie wasn't watching them from a dark corner table. I suppose you think that makes me weak, Maggie told the prince. No. I find you to be surprisingly strong. Prince Fitzhugh returned his searching gaze to Maggie's face. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded and said, and yes, I'll do it.